the title of my talk is Choose Your Own Adventure, the power of embracing your social entrepreneurial self. How many folks in here have heard of the Choose Your Own Adventure series or know what I'm talking about, the 80s and 90s? All right, all right. This is sort of my message today in general. This is a collection of Choose Your Own Adventure books. I've read a bunch of these, and at the top there's a Choose Your Own Adventure banner. But I really do believe that, in my mind, the key insight emanating from a conference like this ought not to be just how do you launch your own enterprise, but how do you model behavior kind of throughout your careers that may one day evolve into a citizen effect, but may evolve into something else, and that's okay too. And so let's make a crazy assumption today, is sort of part of what I want to get at in my talk. Let's be a little outrageous, and what I mean by that is, let's just assume for a second we already are a group of accomplished social entrepreneurs, all of you. How many of you have actually incorporated what you think of as a social enterprise, have a business card, etc.? Okay? But in my mind, we're all social entrepreneurs. So let's see what happens if we make an assumption of our own collective accomplishment in this space, in a space that we're still trying to excel at, as am I. Some of you, this I think is the logo of the Notre Dame Student Activities Office. Some of you may have started student organizations here at Notre Dame. That, in my mind, is social entrepreneurial behavior. Some of you may just buy website names all the time. How many people here have bought a website, a URL name, and just have stuff reserved for the future, right? For something big coming up, right? In my mind, that's part of social entrepreneurial behavior, especially if you're incorporating the right sorts of things. How many of you have had ideas in organizations you've worked at here at Notre Dame, just ideas that, and projects that you've led within bigger organizations? Anyone? Yes? No? Good. All right. My talk is not going to be about building companies. I'm not going to talk to you about building companies. I've started organizations. We can talk about that in Q&A, et cetera, but I'm not going to talk about building companies. I'm not going to talk to you about how we define social entrepreneurship, whether it is or isn't about long-term revenue streams, entrepreneurs that translate lessons from their work to the public system in the form of policy advocacy, entrepreneurs who see their job as creating an environment for competitors to surface. That's not what I'm going to talk about. I suspect there are other settings in which those sorts of things may surface. Let's talk about something else. Let's talk about social entrepreneurial behavior that might be more closely within our reach for all of us across sectors and for all people. And again, let's talk about your power to choose a social entrepreneurial adventure, no matter what your career looks like. So I'm the most unlikely entrepreneur out there. I'm the son of Indian physicians in New York, came to college pre-med, highly left brain orientation, won science fairs in high school, et cetera, et cetera. Didn't think I had a creative bone in my body, and unlikely I should have added unsuccessful. But I'm going to talk about three things, really, that in my journey as a social entrepreneur have been really crucial beginning points, for me at least, that I think are applicable to all of us as we chase a North Star of perhaps one day being founder and CEO of an organization that's got all sorts of bottom lines. I'm going to talk about the importance of thinking in terms of projects. I'm going to talk about the importance of thinking in terms of websites and URLs. And I'm going to talk about the importance of decisions, not just any decisions, but big decisions, as we think about our own power as social entrepreneurs. And I'm going to do that by kind of chronicling a little bit of sort of how these themes have intersected with my own career, and then I'll shut up and we'll do a fun Q&A if that's cool. Projects. So the earliest, I tried to trace sort of my own where did Rishi and entrepreneurship sort of begin, and it sort of began in the context of my relationship with the university, my alma mater. When I was in school 13 years ago, I started a program called '04 United, which was meant to bring our undergraduate class together at Princeton. Different groups and residential colleges coming together in all sorts of different ways. I won't bore you with it. On the right side, that's the logo of our IT department. When I served on Princeton's Board of Trustees, I convinced our IT department to give students all of their intellectual property when they left college. Here are all your email addresses. Here's everything you've generated on our network. It's yours. It's the record of your life. You keep it. So for me, these were nominal, endearing, lowbrow, quasi-successful projects that helped me just begin to embrace an identity of leaning in. And it was really important for me as I moved from a would-be physician. Nothing wrong with being a physician, but in my culture I grew up in, I never thought I could do things like these. So for me, it began with projects. And I'm sure many of you have projects like these, and I want to encourage people to think in terms of projects, or rather emphasize it's okay to think in terms of projects as you cycle up towards being a successful social entrepreneur. I think the web, most of my career has been at Google, I think the web gives us unparalleled opportunity to project ourselves and to project our theories of change online. And part of what I've found maybe even more helpful than this notion of projects is using the web to be disruptive publicly, to project a theory of change publicly, even if it doesn't mean I don't yet have an operation or an organization. For me, the examples I'm about to share have been the most instrumental in getting things going. It all starts with Register.com. Got an account at Register.com where I have scores and scores of social change websites reserved, but it really began 6 years ago. And I can't tell you how important it is. These days, all organizations are media organizations. All companies are media organizations and internet organizations. And so as you think about your own ideas, it sounds lame, but it's always been important for me to begin on the web. With whatever ideas I've had, I've started out in that way. When I lived in India working for Google, I ran Google's public affairs in South Asia. So all of the company's efforts to sell to government, fight censorship in South Asia, build elections products. Best job I may ever have. But one of the things I got to do on the side was I started something called India Voices. And it all started by purchasing IndiaVoices.org. My whole idea, really naive, still is really naive, and you can check it out at IndiaVoices.org, was that folks in India, the voices of average citizens, your maids, your security guards, your blue-collar workers, are not heard in kind of mainstream public square. So I thought, what if I build a powerful public brand and start capturing these voices? Ask my maid, what does she think about the Obama-McCain election? Ask her what she thinks about terrorism in India. You'd be surprised what you heard. So I set up a YouTube channel. Just set up a YouTube channel. And I was amazed at how it was received in the public, both by digital media and by offline media. I, in fact, considered quitting my job at Google to just build this. But more than anything, this is just still a cute project that's not incorporated in any way, and I will at some point nurture it, and I'm trying from afar. But more than anything, this was a turning point for me on the web, a webby project, in becoming comfortable with being disruptive. And I think it was just really important for me, because what social entrepreneurship is ultimately about, it's not running for office, but you're putting yourself out there, open for criticism, because you're bombastic enough to lead with a mission statement. Right? People that lead with mission statements polarize because you're articulating a theory of change. And for me, this was an incredibly helpful moment in my own journey as an entrepreneur on the web. While at Google, I also built the company's first, what we call, elections transparency product. So a lot of Google, in the context of elections right now, you'll always see Google creating easy opportunities for you to learn, register to vote, learn about your candidates in sort of customized and interesting ways. We have one boxes, the company calls it, where if you Google Obama and something, you'll see search customized to you in kind of an interesting, simple way. But years ago, Google was sort of just sloppily, as the company does, experimenting with a lot of things. And I built a product that helped citizens in India not only find out where to vote, but find out how many of their candidates have gone to jail before, how many people in their constituency can access clean water. And this wasn't something that was part of the job description, but it was for me a really neat way, again, to use the web in a really aggressive way in the public square. I wasn't doing any of this with an orientation around being an entrepreneur one day. But for me, it was just, from an identity standpoint, it got me closer to sort of, how can I be anything but an entrepreneur? Which I think is why some of the questions we're all wrestling with today. Later on in my career, I started something called Michigan Core. This is actually the first logo for Michigan Core, which isn't used right now, as Dan knows. But again, my wife and I were coming back to the U.S. a few years ago, and we saw a state that is Michigan, purportedly struggling, economically, socially. What we also saw, for the state of Michigan at least, was an incredible network of people. The chief executives of Microsoft, Twitter, co-founders of Groupon, CEO of Google, founder of Sun Microsystems, founder of Craigslist, all traced their roots to Metro Detroit and Michigan. We said, wow, this is clearly a state that produces great people. What if we built an organization that promoted a new kind of service, a modern, internet-y version of change? Of what it means to be a core member. Not go do 2 years of service or 1 year of service, but make an e-intro, support a Citizen Effect project online, make a loan to an entrepreneur through Kiva. And so we built Michigan Core, but again, it all began by, what are we going to call this? Is the website available? It is. Let's do it. and we began, and we made the decision to do it, which I'll get into in a little bit. Which brings me to decisions. Part of what's been really important throughout my career in social entrepreneurship has been the ability and the internalizing being a big decision person, both vis-a-vis your organization, vis-a-vis your career. And for me, there have been a number of decisions throughout that have helped me be in a position where I get to partner with someone like Dan on stuff we're doing in Detroit, which I'll talk about in a second. The first big decision that I'll tell you about is leaving Google in Silicon Valley. My first year at Google, I was an advisor to our CEO then, Eric Schmidt. I was doing communications work for him. I helped set up the first version of Google.org, which has since, I think is on version 7.0 now or something. And was having a blast, cushy job, to say the least. But I knew I wanted something more. I knew I wanted to grow as a leader, and so I decided to move to India, which I think then constituted 0.5% of Google's global revenue, so it sort of didn't matter as a sales engine for the company. But I knew it would be a great training ground for me to grow as a leader, to be an entrepreneur within the company. So I remember talking to my mom about this move from San Francisco to India, and she said, we spent all this time moving over here. What the heck are you doing moving back? But for me, it was a big counterintuitive decision that I think is really what social entrepreneurship is about. It's about big decisioning, both when you make the leap and when you're running the organization itself. A lot of people don't know this, but I thought about going to graduate school. So I applied to graduate school right when we had this idea for Michigan Core. I got into Harvard Business School, was ready to go, and I put a big X through it and said, no thanks, I'm going to go build my organization. It's supposed to be an applause line because we're at... But seriously, I wrestled a lot with my career and a whole range of options in front of me. As I mentioned, we had this sort of very, at that point in time, naive vision for what Michigan Core could be for the state of Michigan, and really serving as a model for the country, a new way for people to use the internet to connect with one another on change, informed by a Michigan identity. Think about what AmeriCorps looks like in the year 2050. Is it just go do 1 year of service, 2 years of service, or is it here's a whole suite of internet tools, which include things like Citizen Effect, which include things like some of the other things we've done at Michigan Core. So I said, HBS, no thanks. But it was a big decision. Took a lot of heat from parents, from the community, and family in general. But it's something that I think has led to being known as a big decision person. And I think part of what's exciting about choosing an adventure that is social entrepreneurial is, as I'll get to later, you start building a not only kind of a conditioning yourself to behave in a certain way, but you begin building, honestly, a brand in your communities. Everybody here is ambitious with career and more, and it serves as a positive reinforcing effect for career. Now, something else funny happened. I was running Michigan Core full-time. We had built a really exciting network that included Fortune 100 CEOs and pastors in Detroit, all of whom were using the internet to collaborate with one another on change. We started something called Kiva Detroit, which was America's first online micro-lending initiative, through which citizens in Detroit use the internet to make loans to other citizens in Detroit, because everyone is incredibly passionate and resourceful, yet there just aren't easy opportunities to lean in. So I was having fun, and along came the Knight Foundation about a year and a half ago and said, Rishi, all we want to invest in Detroit is internet plus citizenship. We want to invest in other Michigan Cores. We want to invest in other Kiva Detroits. Why don't you consider plowing our resources, stewarding our resources towards that end? And so here I am, an entrepreneur, social entrepreneur. I just applied for Echoing Green. Michigan Core was announced as a semifinalist for Echoing Green, the first semifinalist from the state of Michigan in the 21st century. And here came the Knight Foundation asking me to leave so that the organization could be, and leave the fate of the organization in sort of uncertain terms. Fortunately, my co-founder is my wife, but still, what do we do as entrepreneurs when we're faced with new opportunities or new relationships with the things we've started? And so I made a big decision. I said, you know what? I'm not so tied to my organization's not about me. And I'd encourage all of you, as you're thinking about entrepreneurship, in some ways, entrepreneurship is about projecting your own identity. And that's sort of what's beautiful about entrepreneurship, is that when Dan's standing up there showing you Citizen Effect, it's a projection of his own identity. And you can't put a price on what that means to someone's sense of fulfillment. But I made the decision to leave the organization I'd started full-time and be an active board member and have a different relationship with Michigan Core, now as board chair. But again, a big decision. And I think that ultimately, I think it's served me well. It's served the organization well. It's helped the organization flourish and become disassociated from me. And again, I think is the kind of behavior you don't hear a lot about in our field. When you go to your mainstream social entrepreneurship conferences, the last thing they'll tell you to do is leave your organization. But I think as we live in a world where no organization has a monopoly on change. In fact, it's just a whole range of actors. And so we ought to, in my mind, not all be committed to leaving our organizations, but be thinking creatively about how we relate to them. So what's it resulted in? It's resulted in actually this sort of career ADD path that I've been on has actually resulted in real organizations and real impact. Michigan Core today is a flourishing nonprofit that, again, serves as an online hub for Michiganders in the state, in Detroit, around the state, and around the world to connect with one another through social media, through micro-lending, through citizen philanthropy, and just through our staff and our team. The U.S. ambassador to Russia is from Michigan, and he called us and said, Rishi, how can I connect to my state? I got Russian companies looking to do business in the U.S. Maybe I can go through Michigan Core in your network. So Michigan Core is running, even though I'm not affiliated with it as a staff member. Kiva Detroit, as I mentioned, the country's first micro-lending initiative, is flourishing. It launched at Clinton Global Initiative last year and has got an exciting team nominating entrepreneurs and lending to them online. Detroit for Detroit is another initiative I'm just honored to be affiliated with. Your Notre Dame's own Dan Morrison is the founder of Citizen Effect, as you know, and one of his products, one of his initiatives, is something called Detroit for Detroit, where Detroiters support nonprofits over the internet and pledge to support them over the course of a year. A plug for one of our entrepreneurs at Kiva Detroit. He's fundraising right now. This is from this morning. A startup theater in Detroit. An entrepreneur, a for-profit entrepreneur looking to start a socially minded, community-oriented theater in the city. So if you go to zip.kiva.org and register there, you can find DB there and make a loan to him directly. And this is something that, is a result of some of the things we've started. I started something called Be Me, which is a social network for black males in Detroit that gives black male leaders in Detroit, which gives folks in the community an easy way to share their stories of leadership and then be invested in and connected in by the rest of the community. So again, for me, this journey of actual successful social enterprises and having the opportunity to even come here would not have been possible had I not accidentally connected with projects and their importance in getting started, accidentally connected with the power of the web in projecting a theory of change and just being willing to, and then accidentally kind of connected into an interest in just making big counterintuitive decisions. But I think that's sort of what's led to my ability to be at least early stage successful in social entrepreneurship. What's fun about internalizing this mindset, and this is true for me right now, is that it leads to more ideas, more websites, I get more ideas now, and opportunities to come speak here. And of course, for you all, if you think in this way, and I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir actually, leads to more Irish impact. So thank you again, and check out the new little hashtag I came up with. Thank you. So I'm not sure how much time I have, but plenty. Okay, great. Well, I'd love to have a conversation that is about what I talked about, anything specific, or maybe all the things I decided not to talk about, which is fine as well.
We have a microphone here, anyway. You talked about two concepts. You talked about entrepreneurship and leadership. Can you be an entrepreneur and not be a leader?
Well, in my experience, no. I mean, you may not self-identify as a leader. Entrepreneurs may not be out there. No, the society may not be playing back to entrepreneurs, right? That they're leaders. But in my mind, is entrepreneurs, and it's what this country is about, are courageous individuals, articulating theories of change, especially if you're a social entrepreneur. And I think of social entrepreneurs as entrepreneurs with mission statements. In my mind, the two can't be disassociated. I think we as a community, as a university community, as a country, et cetera, need to do a better job equating the two a bit more, at least as sort of North Stars that are worth pursuing. But in my mind, entrepreneurial behavior is by definition sort of about civic leadership. Right there.
Oh, sorry.
Rishi, listen, I'm trying to get one laptop per child into the city of Detroit. Maybe you can help me. So let's talk after we're done.
I think the Knight Foundation has supported, if I'm not mistaken, one laptop per child in Miami, our home city. And so happy to talk. Happy to take questions on anything, really. There's one over here and over there. So, okay, we'll have someone yell.
I was wondering, you talked about the uncomfortable decisions that you make. Can you guide us in how you kind of thought about them, how you came to them, and what led you to make those uncomfortable decisions, unconventional too?
Sure. I mean, so much of this conference, I imagine, is more technical than this talk. So I don't want to get overly gushy, right? But for me, it's ultimately about knowing your center, and knowing that the world rallies around people who double down on their center, in my experience. And so trusting in that, trusting in, no matter how hard it is, ultimately people respond to people who seem to be projecting authenticity is sort of what I. The other thing I've just, I noticed signs, wherever I sort of, there were enough guideposts along the way, and meeting Dan is one of them. Dan and I share a background across sectors, a background in entrepreneurial stuff in India, and a background in, passion for citizenship. I wouldn't have met Dan had I not connected along this path along the way. And so for me, Dan is a guidepost, as an example. And you've got to be, because this path is difficult, because society doesn't, you don't hear our presidential candidates talking about social entrepreneurship, right? You don't see the media talking about this stuff, right? We don't have an ecosystem in our country that is playing back and patting us on the back for this conference and this behavior, right? So we've got to be more intentional about looking for guideposts and looking for nourishment. If this was a conference on internet startups, right, social media, consumer internet startups, which can be social as well, of course, you'd have a different ecosystem rallying around it. And so I think we've just got to be more intentional about nourishing one another, and that's been really helpful for me.
Following along that line of thinking, what are the biggest pitfalls that individuals here in this room can make as they proceed? Or do you see this whole industry, ecosystem, what are the biggest risks out there? How could we fail, and how do we stay on the rails?
Yeah. So two parts to that answer. One, I'll talk about just my own experience building something specific, and then I'll talk about this ecosystem thing. I'll work backwards. I think we all ought to be thinking about, and I think that's why people like Melissa and Brendan deserve a round of applause. Let's give it to them for a conference like this. We all ought to be thinking about the supportive ecosystem, right, for social entrepreneurs. So if your idea happens to be an idea for a new media property dedicated to chronicling the way David Bornstein does the success of social entrepreneurs, we ought to. If your idea is to start a think tank devoted to this field, double down on it. If your idea is to develop a policy shop, chamber of commerce for social entrepreneurs, do it, right? So one part of the answer is we need to set in motion ecosystem level stuff so that the entrepreneurs can succeed themselves. The biggest lesson from something like Michigan Core, when I started Michigan Core, the idea was not an online platform for Michiganders to connect and make a difference over the web. That's not what it was. That's idea number 14 in the journey. I thought I'd do a venture fund of Michigan people. I thought I'd do a big community foundation with Michigan people. I mean, it was crazy. So one is your ideas will change, which you hear about all the time. But I would really caution against getting too big from a staffing perspective, from a fundraising perspective. One of the accidental lessons of the successes of Michigan Core is no matter how much money we were able to raise from the chairman of Google and people with deep pockets, just decided not to hire. So we're not going to hire. We are so conditioned as a society to think that change is driven by staff who sit in offices with phones, and we forget that social enterprises might actually co-create with customers, co-create with citizens. And so Michigan Core actually, for most of its time, even today, is mostly run by a network of people now being steered by an executive director, et cetera. But we didn't get too big. And in my mind, I would be very, very cautious about hiring and getting too big because it's the old model. The new model is it's never been easier to empower others to actually do your work for you.
I really appreciate your focus on websites and those as catalysts. But I recently created a project and started by creating a website, so sort of following your advice. And then it occurred to me that I really hadn't done anything yet. I had a beautiful website, and it looked like I had done a lot of things. And so I started to, I'm wondering about the appearance of having done a lot.
Sure.
Embedded into a website. But then I've used the website to apply for some funding, and it looks like that might work, and it looks like then I can do more. So I'm not saying that it's not a good idea. I'm just saying, can you discuss the tension between sort of the beauty of the web, and it looks like we're such an established organization, and perhaps the reality that not that many things are happening, or mouths aren't being fed, or so on.
Yeah, for me, the web is, it certainly is a way to project power and project credibility and embellish credibility and embellish power. But mostly for me, it's actually been much more of an internal forcing function, a personal forcing function that, we all have high expectations for ourselves. And so for me, I think about what it would be like to have started some of this stuff in the 80s and 90s, before a large consumer web was around. What would be my sort of biological clock, making sure, right, that I've projected this, you better go work on it. And frankly, some of that fourth estate pressure, when we launched Michigan Core early on, one of the things that happened was, before we did anything, was we had a well-designed web property. The media covered it. We got the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal excited about what we were building, not what we'd built. So that fourth estate of people just sort of being aware, you got to believe that played a role in me saying no to HBS, because I just felt like I had to, because I hold myself up to big things. And so I think it's important not to get carried away with, what I mean on the web is sort of faking it. But at the same time, I think because I'm talking, I know, to an audience of people that hold themselves up to high standards, it's important to, we all need forcing functions, let's be honest.
Excellent, thank you.
I liked what you said about using the web to revolutionize, that's probably my word, but to speak the truth, to put it out there, to stir the pot a bit. My question is, for all of us running nonprofits and for-profits who need cooperation or funding from governments and corporations, can you do both? Can you tell people what they need to hear and what they want to hear? Can you run India Voices and maybe 5 years from now go back and start a clean water initiative that would require government and corporate support around India? Can you speak the truth and still get things done?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think especially for millennials, I imagine this sort of stuff resonates with millennials in particular, who are used to coming of age on the web, who are used to managing multiple identities. So part of my struggle has been managing these live fires, all of which are active identities that sometimes collide with each other. Which is the heart of your question, which is, what if you set in motion a range of things that actually conflict with one another as you're trying to build one? And so I wish we lived in a world of where everybody sort of looked at my narrative and said, "Good stuff," saw value. But a lot of people are perplexed, which hat you're putting on. So my honest advice is just to play the game properly, which is to know. And get back to this ecosystem thing. We're conditioned in a world, our world is conditioned to see people sort of one hat at a time for a long time. And to do anything that seems to conflict feels peculiar. And so I try to play that a little bit. I try to make sure that, for a particular customer or a particular would-be partner, they consume a particular, so in your India Voices example, I might steer clear of some of these would-be government partners for later, because they might feel disrupted by my India Voices thing, and so I try to account manage in simple ways, so my account management techniques don't feel sloppy, so that each customer is consuming one version of Rishi.
What prevented you from, doubling down, as you say, on a project like India Voices and doing it full time?
Honestly, yeah. This is one that's on my bucket list because I really believe that India, a country of more than 1 billion people, and a democratic country, just needs more settings in which the voices of the masses are consumed in credible ways. And so this is on the bucket list. I think a couple of things. One, it was early in my journey, right? Like I just hadn't yet understood. I hadn't yet processed me as Rishi as entrepreneur. It was just as I reflect back, it was probably the turning point for me because it's the first time I ever even considered making the jump. But I think it was just early in my own narrative. And then second, I was working at a place like Google where I had very near-term opportunities to drive against the same mission. And so this is important. For me, all these sort of decision moments, even, going Michigan core to night, it's the same mission, right? And so work backwards from mission statement is what I would say, right? And for me, mission statement happens to be, the thing I geek out about is using the web to project people's power, project people's impact. I just love that. That just happens to be what all my social enterprises will be about. And so if a bigger fish comes and says, can you just add it made sense. And so for me, I think it's important to, there's a line of thinking that says entrepreneurs are self-serving, egotistical, right? Entrepreneurship is sort of about ego, right? It's important to guard against that. And I think that's what some of these decisions have been about. It's like, I can't have Michigan core just be about me, because it's the same mission I get to drive at if I put the night hat on. And so Google gave me that opportunity in India to drive against the India Voices mission. More questions?
I've actually got a question.
Sure.
So as you're doing Michigan core, and so in social entrepreneurship, we talk about scale, replication, and so, I mean, it's one state. Why not Indiana core? Why not, why not expand regionally? Why not franchise this or replicate this model? Don't other states need this? And so, are you waiting for somebody else to pick up the charge, or is this something that you have the vision for and therefore can drive?
Sure.
And how do you answer that for yourself and for others who might be thinking about that?
So here's what's interesting about that question. Earlier in my career, I worked for a group called College Summit, another social enterprise named U.S. Social Entrepreneur of the Year at Davos a few years ago, Ashoka Fellow, et cetera. So a good chunk of my career has been spent kind of in this bi-coastal zone, right, where all people talk about are metrics, scale, replication, yada, 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 right? Just sort of you're on that Boston to San Francisco flight and you're just metricizing and replicating, and how do you do that? And then I've kind of been in Michigan where it's like, geez, and I began Michigan core in that way. I began Michigan core with an orientation around scale, let's get big ASAP. I want to open an office in Chicago. I want to open an office in San Francisco to cultivate Michiganders, but set this up in other states. We had a state of Ohio call, the state of North Carolina call, and the state of Virginia call. And the White House's chief technology officer, Anish Chopra, call about, national model. And I think the biggest lesson for me, which is not, at least not what I consume when I run around the circuit, is wait. Certainly share lessons. Certainly begin to build a brand in the space as the Corporation for National Service in whoever's president in a year from now begins thinking about how it can be more internet-y. Believe me that I've built relationships there so that they do call on Michigan core to do something. But to spend too much time thinking about all of that stuff too early has been, I've been there. I've tried doing that. I found that to be enormously counterproductive because I hadn't even proved concept yet. And so we kind of doubled down on the small.
Rishi, when you and I spoke a few months back, one of the things that struck me was I think you'd said one of the things you learned over your career was how amazingly arrogant philanthropy can be, around the world, and how important it was to really listen to, the grassroots efforts to get them involved and really incorporate the voice of the beneficiary into your solution. Can you kind of talk to me about that a little bit more?
Yeah, what's really exciting about a place like the Knight Foundation is, the Knight brothers own newspapers. We were the country's biggest newspaper company for most of the 20th century. And so what we invest in today is really opportunities for people to connect to information and connect to civic action. Democracy, really. We don't invest in one issue. We don't invest in one. And I find that a lot of social change is a little bit too if X then Y. Right? There's this notion that a grant here leads to Y outcome, that 3 FTEs here lead to Z outcome, that an office here and a collaborative there leads to that, right? My experience has been that social change is way more circular. It's way more complex. And while anyone can, particularly people in this room, can break it down into PowerPoints and spreadsheets, I think it's really important for philanthropies in particular, and everyone in this space, to know that no one has in order for real change to endure, people got to own it, no matter what issue you're working on. People have to just have internalized that I got to own the issue. Otherwise, democracy doesn't work, community doesn't work. And so all the things that we invest in as a philanthropy at Knight, the biggest question we ask is, to any nonprofit we're giving money to, is how many people, we don't want to hear about your staff, how many people have you mobilized to co-produce your work with you, whether you're doing education or economic development. And that perspective, I think we need more of. It's never been easier to think in those terms because of the internet, but I find that it's not something that is mainstream just yet. That's why it's exciting to be at a place like Knight, because we try to push the sector to think in those ways.
Thank you.
Right here.
How do you define the difference between a social entrepreneurial venture and a not-for-profit or a charity? Do you have can you separate the two, or are they one and the same?
Yeah, I mean, I have a technical answer and then a big picture answer. My technical answer about social entrepreneurs are entrepreneurs who, are being thoughtful about revenue and sustainability. Not saying they have to have it, but being thoughtful about revenue and sustainability. They are translating lessons they're learning from their work to the system at large in some structured way, not leaving it to chance. And they're actually creating an environment where it's easier for competitors, their own competitors, to come at them. Right? The best social entrepreneurs I've worked with and been a part of are those that actually are happy to nurture competition. When we started Michigan Core, there are a bunch of, as Dan knows, there's a bunch of new Detroit, similar things that are focused on Detroit that started up around the country, Detroit Nation and Detroit Expats Network, and we were like, great. So that's the technical answers. I think it's entrepreneurs who care about revenue, who care about the system, and who care about competition. The bigger picture answer has to do with mission statements. I haven't codified how I talk about this, but the thing I've sort of learned is that whether you're a restaurant, an internet company, a nonprofit, a university, if you go so far as to articulate a mission statement for what the world you want to see, there's a good chance your organization is DNA'd to be a bit more about civic orientation. And in Detroit, part of what's happening right now is we have retail entrepreneurs, restaurants, artists, hackers, technologists from Brooklyn, Berlin, and from the neighborhoods starting things that just cut across. And they've got mission statements. You walk into a restaurant in Detroit, give you a mission statement. And in my mind, that's a social entrepreneur because you hold yourself up to something bigger.
How do you know what you're doing? How do you know that what you're doing is working? So how do you measure the social impact of your ventures, and how do these organizations track their progress?
I love that. So my orientation is about the thing. So it all depends on what your theory of change is, right? Forget the organizational theory of change. How does change happen in the world? My own personal view is change happens when people own it, right? When people in a city, in a university, when more and more people feel as though they're sharing in that mission statement, right? That's just my view. All right, how the heck do you measure that, right? Because I can give you cost per outcome, I can give you kids enrolled in college, but will it last to the next CEO of College Summit or the next superintendent in St. Louis? I don't know, right? So for me, the core measure has got to be civic ownership. That's my perspective. Now, how do you measure that? So when Facebook and all these internet companies report quarterly earnings, what are they reporting on besides the dollar figure? They're reporting on usage, right? Facebook reports 7-day actives, 30-day actives. Why? It's a proxy for everything else. It's a proxy for their value from that marketers get out of the product. And so I've tried to push a metric that I call usage of the public square, right? Can any organization, any initiative, any university, any entity talk to me about usage of your product, usage of your initiative, the number of people actually leaning in and lending, donating, nominating, supporting a citizen effort. So to me, I anchor around usage and as a proxy for success. Because if an organization has got, whether you're the NRA or myBarackObama.com, if you can claim a user base of X and a level of activity of Y, and both of those are pretty impressive, it's a good chance that you will be successful no matter how big you are, et cetera, et cetera. So kind of anchoring at what your user base has got to look like and their engagement levels have got to look like, to me, is the most important metric. Dan?
So I know for a fact that you probably sit around and have thought through 1,000 different URLs and projects, right? So how do you say no? Like, when do you know to say no, and when do you know to say yes?
Yeah, it's something I've struggled with, as Dan knows. I feel like I've got career ADD, and I think this is going to be something, a lot of millennials in particular struggle with. We're just our attention spans are everywhere, et cetera. For me, it comes down to two things. One, knowing my personal mission statement, and so if I've got an idea for an e-commerce product, or I got an idea for some other sector, I got to make sure I'm spending my days every day working on personal mission statement. My personal mission statement happens to be this notion of, the web and people's power and people's. So that's how I've said no to a lot of tangential ideas that I've had, and I've been happy to get other people involved in them. And the other thing is, honestly, comes down to circumstance and knowing that, life is long, and there are going to be opportunities to tackle things at various times. There are seasons to this. I'm a father with a mortgage, with a 3-year-old, et cetera. There are certain things I just can't do. But that doesn't mean I can't make big decisions about mobilizing teams around things I want to do. I think there are ways to be creative about things. So it's, some combination of personal mission statement and circumstance.
During the lecture, you spoke a lot about wearing multiple hats.
Yeah.
Can you explain further the way in which the internet has empowered us to do that?
Ways in which the internet has empowered us to do that?
Yes.
Yeah, I think, get some expert from, who thinks about the internet and society all day. I think the internet has made us more acutely aware of our identity, of many disparate identities, as people. Whether it's our identity as friend, whether it's our identity as employee, whether it's identity as professional, whether it's identity as citizen journalist. I think there are a number of different identities all of a sudden we are self-aware of about ourselves. And so as a result, I think that creates a dynamic where people who are coming of age on the internet are more easily able to see themselves in a variety of different roles, but at the same time, maybe are hard to anchor down on one or the other. So I think it's sort of sacramentalized or sort of formalized a variety of our identities because they project themselves in so many clear ways. The products I'm talking about. But I think I think about myself. And I'll get to there's an idea in this space, by the way. On Twitter, I see myself as sort of a citizen journalist / chronicler of the world. LinkedIn is my kind of professional identity. Facebook is sort of where I feel like a family and friend guy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think, by the way, there's a platform out there yet that plays to our citizen identity, right? And that's what Dan and I are working on, right? Dan and I are trying to build mainstream platforms that cultivate our identity as citizens. 50 years from now, what public company are we going to be celebrating that unlocked the identity of citizens globally as citizens? And what does that mean? How does that work? And part of what we've been trying to do, Dan and I, is creating real sex appeal and pixie dust and attractiveness and energy around the idea of citizenship. And it's important.
That was our last question. Thank you very much, Rishi.
Hey, thank you.